The spotlight. When he ran for the U.S. House in Minnesota, he became the first ever Muslim American elected to Congress. If he thought he was stepping out of the limelight when he left Congress and became Minnesota's Attorney General, it didn't exactly work out. He is back in national focus, now heading the case against the 4 Minneapolis officers who sparked such national outrage. And Attorney General Ellison is kind enough to talk to his hometown this morning from his office in St. Paul. Attorney General Ellison, thank you so much. It's good to have you with me this morning.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I want to start with the unusual nature this situation must be for Minneapolis, St. Paul. Long kind of seen as a vanguard of liberal thinking in America, everything from Hubert Humphrey to Paul Wellstone, and the city that gave us Prince in Paisley Park. It must strike you as very odd that it is now seen as the epicenter of what's happening in America.
Well, the truth is, Minneapolis is a wonderful city, but it also has another sort of experience for African American people. Not all, but many. I can tell you it's somewhat of a tale of two cities. And you have people doing very well, a lot of prosperity and a lot of progressive ideas. But it also has disparities for African Americans that are pretty dramatic. Say 70% of all Minnesotans own their own home, but only around a quarter of African Americans do. The average income is about $68,000 a year in Minnesota, but the average income for African Americans is hovering around $30,000.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of stark issues when it comes to racial disparities. My argument is that if this can be a place for prosperity and happiness for white Minnesotans, it can be for everybody, and we got to work hard to make that so, and we got real work to make sure that we close that gap.
You do have real work ahead. You've talked about how difficult this task is going to be as we move ahead with the case. Before we get to that, though, there's been a fair amount of Monday morning quarterbacking about the way that Minneapolis police handled this from the get-go. Even the Detroit chief, James Craig, has said if they just would have put the Officer Chauvin in handcuffs right away, the way we would have with a private citizen, if we had seen that video, that maybe things could have been different. Should it have been handled differently from the start?
You know what? I have to say, I really don't know. We have the facts that we have, and that's what we have to deal with. I will say that the chief, Madera Arredondo, is a reform-minded chief. He fired those 4 officers on the scene who are responsible and who have now subsequently been charged with second-degree murder. And he has been very clear about the duty to intervene and the duty to assist people who are in need. And so, I'll say that Minneapolis Police Department has solid leadership, but we have a ways to go to really let some of those reforms get into the rank and file. And obviously, we got a lot of work to do given the outcome of about 11 days ago.
Well, and you have said now, trying this case won't be easy. Winning a conviction will be hard. Everyone is going to have to kind of go to school here a little bit on Minnesota law, which I'm told by a former U.S. attorney is kind of unusual against the way that maybe people might expect this to go, and that the statutes are written, it's kind of tough to prosecute a police officer.
Well, it's that way all over the country. I mean, let me remind you, we all saw what happened to Freddie Gray, and we saw the video, and we saw everything. We thought, okay, we know what's going to happen here. Well, there was not one single conviction in that case. Or what about Walter Scott in South Carolina? The officer, he was running away and was shot in the back multiple times. That jury hung at the state level, and the feds had to come in and prosecute to get a conviction. Why stop there? Philando Castile was shot on Facebook live stream in front of us. And that case ended in acquittal. And of course, we all remember Rodney King. Not we all don't, but people you and I's age remember it. And, that case, that Simi Valley verdict, acquitted. So these cases are not easy. Many cases, there was never even any charge. There was no bill of indictment in the Mike Brown case. There was no bill of indictment in the Eric Garner case.
Yep.
So these cases are not easy. And so it's important for people to understand that, because we look at the video and we're like, it couldn't be more clear. What's the problem? Well, the problem is it's a complicated thing, a set of features of our system, which I think up until now have led to the under prosecution of excessive force by police.
Well, shouldn't we rightly worry about what the reaction of Americans would be if that officer somehow is not convicted?
I'm not going to absorb that pressure. I'm going to put every cell of my being into obtaining convictions that are supported by the facts and the law. And we're going to do our best at every single link of the prosecutorial chain. And then, we're going to put it in hands of the jury. Now, I have confidence that Minnesotans will do the right thing and enforce the law and find guilt, because I wouldn't have charged this case out unless I believed that. But ultimately, this will be a decision by a jury, most likely, and therefore, we'll see.
Yeah. Keith, as somebody who grew up in Detroit, you grew up in the most segregated metropolitan area in America. This many years later, you come to see the kind of week that we've just had across the country. I'm really curious about your reflections on where we are on the matter of race in America right now.
Well, for 243 years, African Americans were held as property. For 100 years after that, we were held as second-class citizens, including in the North, like Detroit and Minneapolis. And it's only been about 55 years that we have not had state-sanctioned suppression of Black people. Only about 55 years of anything else. And then since that time, we've had disparities in every aspect of American life, from police and criminal justice, incarceration, education, economics, jobs, housing, everything. And so we have yet to really reach that liberty and justice for all goal. And this moment that we're in, I hope, makes everyone of all colors, Black, white, Latino, Asian, everybody say that we want an America where it really is about the content of your character. That's really what this moment calls for. And that's what I'm going to do my part to advance.
As we've so long hoped. But this was really such a perfect cocktail of tragedy that we've got this horrible video that we've all watched, and too many of these kinds of cases. It happens against a backdrop where there is so much downward economic pressure right now because of COVID-19, and it saddens me to point out that you, in fact, lost your mother to coronavirus a couple of months ago, and you were back here in Detroit for the funeral. This just seems that this swell of all of these things around, in particular, the Black community, it's an awful lot to ask, isn't it?
Well, look, COVID-19 is not racist, but our healthcare system is. And so, it has a dramatically higher impact on African Americans than others who are generally under insured, who tend to have jobs that put them at greater risk of exposure, who have all these features which basically conspire to diminish Black life. But African Americans are nothing if not resilient. And with the help of our other fellow Americans, we're still moving, man. We're still up here kicking, and we will never rest until this country meets its potential of being a free, equal society. Yeah. And we're committed to it, and we're not going to stop.
The last thing that I wanted to make sure we talked about, you mentioned earlier reforms that are needed, and I wanted to talk about actionable steps that we can take. It's really hard to get into the hearts and minds of people and change the way they think. Short of that, there must be some things that we can do to change, especially when it comes to law enforcement, to change the way that they interact with, especially African Americans, but the community at large. What are the concrete steps that you think we could take starting tomorrow that would make a difference?
Well, I think Congress needs to actually set up a system to calculate and to collect data on deadly force encounters and non-lethal use of force of many of American police. We need to have that system of data collection so we can really know what the scale of the problem is. We don't yet have that. The other thing we can do is empower chiefs of police and say, look, if there's misconduct on your police force, you're going to get rid of those people, or we're going to get rid of you. And and now, because so many agreements with the Police Federation sort of really handcuff the chiefs to really enforce discipline, it's really a problem. There are chiefs who fired officers for excessive force and who've gotten restored because of an arbitrator's decision. We need to empower the chiefs. We do need to do a lot more things with training. In Camden County, New Jersey, they have used body cam to do simulation and do regular training and simulation, so they don't just have a skills course and then send somebody out with a gun.
Yeah.
They have an ongoing course that allows people to really get better as they do the work.
Lastly, Keith, as your state's top law enforcement officer, I'm curious as you look out at the lawlessness that we've seen break out with all of this, the vandalism and the looting. You've already described a certain sympathy that you clearly have for the sentiments behind all this. Or do you have sympathy for the lawlessness that's gone along with it, or is that going to stop because it's clogging up the message?
Let me tell you, I have sympathy for the peaceful demonstrators. People who are committing arson are not helping the cause. In fact, they're hurting it. I'm not at all sure that that is their intent. We've seen some very suspicious characters lighting fires and breaking windows that don't seem to be at all even a part of the protest. But I will say that the peaceful protesters have raised the issue up so that maybe our society can really deal with it. Now, and it will be time soon to really begin to finish the job that the protesters did so well to raise. We do need to get people together and to engage in reform. As it relates to the arsonists and the looters, these people, I mean, what sense does it make to go out and loot and burn down stuff and hurt people who you're doing it to?
Yeah.
In the name of somebody who was hurt. If you really object to what happened to George Floyd, you would never do that to another person. You never victimize another person. And so I cannot stand with that behavior. But for the peaceful protesters, nothing but love.
Attorney General Ellison, I know that you have a million requests of your time right now. I'm so glad you had some time for your hometown today. I know you get back here quite a bit, and here's looking forward to the next time we're together in person. Thank you so much, Keith.
Yes, sir. See you soon.
You bet. Keith Ellison, the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. We come back, we'll talk more about those concrete steps. What can we do? Are there steps that can be taken? This is Flashpoint on Local 4.